Good morning or good evening or good afternoon wherever you are in the world. This is Regina Yao. I am the founder and president of the Pixel Project, and today I'm presenting another Read for Pixels Google Hangout, and we have a very special guest today. It's Jasper Fforde, inventor of Thursday Next. And Jasper will be reading from one of his books, The Eye of Zoltar, in a little bit. But before we proceed with Jasper's reading, I need to tell you a little bit about what Read for Pixels is about. Read for Pixels is a campaign by the Pixel Project, through which we collaborate with 11 award-winning best-selling authors from around the world, and we collaborate with them on these Google Hangouts, which are discussions about popular culture, books, and authors, and violence against women, and gender issues, and women's issues, and such like. And we also have a fundraising component, which is a Read for Pixels fundraiser on Indiegogo and Razoo, and there are some very special prizes. Well, not prizes, but very special perks are available to book fans and geeks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of this session. And now Jasper's here. Hi, Jasper.
Hello.
Yeah, afternoon, Jasper, and take it away with your reading.
Right. Well, as you can see down there, it's down there. So, I'm Jasper Fforde. I'm a fancy author. If you haven't heard of me, that is my name. Really spelt that way. That was the name I was born with. It does actually look like a made-up name that somebody with a boring name would give themselves if they were an author, but it's not. That is actually my name. What I'm going to do to kick off here, and thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me onto this hangout. First of all, I was just going to read a little section from the Eye of Zoltar, which is a book that is due out in the States in, I think it's 2 weeks, and I'm actually going to be touring in the States in 2 weeks, so it's quite an exciting time.
Oh,
so I'm going to read a very small section. So I'm going to read a very short section. I think it's about, is 10 minutes okay,
yeah,
Regina?
10 minutes. Okay. Take it away. We're all on tenterhooks here, okay, because it's a new book. Right. Love new books.
So what's happened here is this is the third in the series about Jennifer Strange. She is the protagonist in this series, and she is somebody who manages wizards and magicians. It takes place in a rather sort of strange, fancy world where magic and all these sort of bizarre things exist, but it's very much our world. It's there are cars, there's electricity. You know, it's not sword and sorcery. It's more about modern day. And in the third book, we meet Jennifer Strange again, and she meets up with the princess of the kingdom in which she lives, and this is a little meeting between her and the king and the queen and the rather spoilt princess whom she has to actually do a little bit of work for. Anyway, this is Jennifer meeting the princess and the king and the queen. The princess huffed again and walked over in a sultry manner. I was the same age as her, but we could not have had more different upbringings. While I spent my first 12 years eating gruel and sharing a dormitory with 60 other girls, Princess Shazine had been indulged in every possible way. She wore clothes cut from the finest cloth, bathed in rainwater imported at a huge expense from Bali, and had her food prepared by Michelin-starred chefs. In short, her every whim satisfied in the most expensive way possible. Despite having never met her, she was very familiar. She could barely catch a cold or be seen with an inappropriate prince without it becoming front-page news. Yes, said the princess in a pouty kind of voice, arms folded. This is Her Royal Highness the Crown Prince Shazine Blossom Hadrid Snod, announced the king, heiress to the kingdom of Snod. The princess looked me up and down as though it was something considerably less important than garbage, but made quite certain she did not make eye contact with me. I hope this interruption to my valuable time has a purpose, she said. Pay attention, princess, said the queen in the sort of voice that makes you take notice. This young lady is Jennifer Strange. She is a manager of Kazam Mystical Arts Management and a young lady of considerable daring, moral worth and resourcefulness. Everything, in fact, that you are not. The princess looked shocked, not believing what she had heard. What? You heard me, replied the queen. Soft living has rendered you spoiled beyond measure, a state of affairs that I admit I am partly responsible. Nonsense, mother, said the princess haughtily. Everyone loves me because I am so beautiful and charming and witty. You there. She pointed to one of the servants whose job it was to clean up after the royal poodles, who were numerous, unruly, and not at all house-trained. Yes, my lady, said the servant, who was a young girl no older than myself. She was pale, had plain, mousy hair, and was dressed in the neat, starched dress of the lowest-ranked house-servant. She looked tired, worn, and old before her time, but she somehow held herself upright with the last vestiges of human dignity. Do you love your princess, girl? Asked the princess. Begging your pardon, yes, I do, my lady, she said with a small curtsy, and am surely grateful for the career opportunities your family's benevolence has brung to me. Well said, said the princess happily. There will be an extra shiny penny in your retirement fund. It will await you on your 75th birthday. Her ladyship is most generous, replied the girl, and, knowing when an audience has ended, went back to cleaning up after the royal poodles. You see, said the princess. A character reference from a royal dog mess removal operative third class is hardly compelling, princess, said the queen. Our minds are made up. If Miss Strange agrees, you shall take counsel from her and try to improve yourself. The princess's mouth actually dropped open, and she gaped inelegantly like a fish for some moments. Take counsel from an orphan, said the princess in an incredulous tone. Is this acceptable with you, Miss Strange? Said the queen. Only too happy to help, I said, not believing for 1 second that the princess would agree to such a thing. Good, said Queen Mimosa. Princess, shake Miss Strange's hand and say good afternoon. I'd rather not, retorted the princess, glancing at me in the eye for the first time. I might catch something. It won't be humility, I replied, staring at her evenly, and figuring that this is probably what they thought the princess needed. If my head was off my shoulders in under 10 minutes, I was wrong. The princess went almost purple with rage. I have been impertinenced, she said finally. I insist that this orphan be executed. I'm not sure impertinenced is a word, I said. If it is, if I say it is, said the princess, and Daddy, you did say for my 16th birthday I could order someone executed. Well, I choose her. She pointed a finger at me. The king looked at Queen Mimosa. I did sort of promise her she could do that, my dear. What sort of a lesson is it if I don't keep my word? What sort of a lesson is it to a child that she can have someone executed? Retorted the queen, and glared at him. Not an ordinary glare, one of those hot and hard stares that leave your neck hot, cause you to fluff your words, and make you prickly inside your clothes. You're right, my dear, replied the king in a small voice. Updating his style of medieval violent monarchy to Queen Mimosa's benevolent dictatorship was a bitter pill to swallow, but the king, to his credit, was at least trying. So, said the queen, are you prepared to shake Miss Strange's hand and greet her, princess? The princess looked at her parents in turn. I would sooner eat dog's vomit than leave us, said the queen in a forthright manner, and the royal retinue, well used to being able to make themselves scarce at a moment's notice, all made for the door. Not you, she said to the royal poodle cleaner-upper who had been quizzed earlier. And that was when I felt a buzzing in the air. It was subtle, like a bee in fog at 40 paces, but it meant only one thing. A spell was cooking. And if that was so, it could only be from the ex-sorcerer, Queen Mimosa. The princess crossed her arms and stared at her mother. You will do as you are told, young lady, said the queen in a measured tone, or you will not be in a position to do anything at all. Do your very worst, spat the princess, her face curled up into an ugly sneer. I will not be ordered about like a handmaiden. Queen, very slowly and deliberately, pointed her index fingers at the princess. These were the conduits of the sorcerer's power. When brought out or pointed anywhere near you, it was time to run, or beg, or duck for cover. The king must have seen this before, for it winced as a powerful surge of energy coursed from Queen Mimosa's fingers. There was a thunderclap, several drapes fell from the walls, and all the window glass suddenly decreased in size by 1/10 and fell out of the frames with an angry clatter. This wasn't a spell, of course, just a secondary effect. When the peal of thunder had receded into the distance, I tried to figure out what spell had been cast, but nothing seemed to have changed. I looked at the king, who was as confused as me, then at the queen, who was blowing on her fingers, the sort of off to do after a particular heavy spelling bout. She seemed quietly confident and not unduly worried. Something had happened, I just wasn't sure what. That was when I noticed the princess, who had such a look of confusion on her face it was hard to describe. She stared at her hands as though entirely alien to her. The king had noticed her odd behaviour too. "My little angel cake," he said, "are you quite well?" "Begging your pardon, your majesties," said the princess, "but I don't half feel peculiar." "My dear," said the king, addressing the queen, "you have given our daughter the voice and manners of a common person." "My nails!" came a voice behind us. "And these clothes! I would not be seen dead in them." We turned around. The servant who had been ordered to remain had broken strict protocol and spoken without being spoken to first, one in a very long line of sackable offences. The queen caught the servant's eye and pointed to her reflection in the mirror. The servant looked, then shrieked, and brought her raw hands up to her face. "Oh," she said, "I am so plain and ugly and common. What have you done, mother?" "Yes," said the king. "What have you done?" "A lesson to show our daughter the value of something when you have lost it." "That's our daughter?" asked the king, staring at the servant, then at the princess, who had started to pirouette in a mildly clumsy fashion in the centre of the room, listening joyfully to the faint rustle of the pink crinoline dress she was wearing. The princess might not be enjoying being a servant, but the servant didn't seem too troubled about being a princess. "You haven't," said the king. "I most certainly have," replied Queen Mimosa. "The princess has swapped bodies with the lowliest servant in the household." The princess looked aghast. "I've learned my lesson," she shrieked. "Turn me back, please. I will do anything, even shake hands with that hideous orphan person." She couldn't even remember my name. But impressed from a technical viewpoint, I turned to the queen. "Remarkable, ma'am. Where did you learn to do that?" "I studied under Sister Organza of Rhodes when a student," she said simply. "The good sister was big on the transfer of minds between bodies." "Please turn me back," yelled the princess again, throwing herself to her mother's feet. "I will never blame the footman for my own stealing or demand people are put to death." "I may have to insist you change her back," said the king with uncharacteristic firmness. "I won't ever make fun of our poor royal cousins for only having 2 castles," pleaded the princess. "I can't have a daughter with lank hair and a pallid complexion," added the king. "It might attract the wrong sort of prince." "Our daughter needs to be taught a lesson," said the queen, "for the good of the kingdom." "There are other ways to punish her," said the king, "and in this matter I will be firm. Return my daughter this instant." "Yes," howled the princess, "and I promise never to pour weed killer in the moat again. I'll even restock the ornamental fish with my own servant's pocket money." "That was you?" said the king, turning on her suddenly. "My prized collection of rare and wonderful koi carp, all stone dead at a stroke? I had my fish keeper stripped of all honours and ordered to milk rabbits for the rest of his life, and you said nothing?" He turned to his wife and gave a short bow. "I suppose it might be for the best," he said wearily. "What?" yelled the princess. "Right," said the queen, clapping her hands. "Miss Strange, I am entrusting you with our daughter's further education. I hope she will learn something from the experience of having and being less than nothing." "I shall hate you forever, mother," said the handmaid next princess sullenly. "You will thank me," the queen replied evenly, "and the kingdom shall thank both your father and I for delivering them a just and wise ruler when we die." The princess said nothing. It was the servant, now princess, who spoke next. "This is a very beautiful room light," she said. "I'd not real noticed before, what with not being allowed to raise my eyes from the floor and all. Is that a painting of a great battle?" "That one," said the king, always eager to show off his knowledge. "It is one of our ancestors' greatest triumph against the Snowdonian Welsh. The odds are astounding, 5,000 against 6. It was a hard, hand-to-hand battle over 2 days, with every inch won in blood and sinew, but thanks Snod we were victorious. Despite everything, we were impressed by the fighting spirit of the Welsh. Those 6 certainly put up a terrific fight." "Look after her, won't you, Miss Strange?" said the queen in a more concerned tone. "I trust in your judgment to educate my daughter. Whatever happens, you will not find the kingdom or myself ungrateful. Bring her back in a month or 2, and I will restore their minds to the correct bodies. Protect her, Miss Strange, but don't cosset her. The future of the kingdom may very well be in your hands. There you go. So we have a nice. I like the trope of changing, princesses disguised as handmaidens. So I thought, well, I'm going to put that in the book, and I'm going to have this horrible, hideous princess being made to be a handmaid. Anyway, so that's kind of at the beginning of the book, and you can see what the princess learns whilst being a handmaiden in the rest of the book.
Oh, brilliant! It actually feeds into the question. The first question we're going to start off the discussion with, which is, your books, your stories remind me so much of, Lewis Carroll and fairy tales, and there's so much intertextuality with literature and all that, and and yet within that sort of those surreal zany settings, your characters are so, they feel so real. And especially your female protagonists. So what inspired the characters of female protagonists like Thursday Next and Jennifer Strange? And how do you, it's a two-part question, and how do you put such real people in such zany situations, and somehow it comes out beautifully?
Oh, well, I mean, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think what happened was that I didn't start off by writing books with female protagonists. The first two novels I wrote had a male protagonist, but I found that the secondary ancillary characters who were female were actually more interesting. So when I started writing my third novel, because I was writing for 11 years and I wrote 6.5 books before I got published. So my third book, which remained unpublished for a long time, was with this character Thursday Next, which I eventually got published. So she started off, but really because I was interested in playing with a female protagonist. The story was originally written in the third person, but I really felt that I wasn't kind of getting into her head enough and really understanding what it was that she was feeling. So I sort of changed it into first person. And it wasn't until almost a decade later, when I was giving a talk about writing Thursday Next, where someone actually said, why are you writing as a woman? Because technically you're not. And that was the first time I'd really thought about it. When you're writing, I think anyone who writes really, there's a lot of what I call back of house. You start writing and you're not sure really why and how you're doing it. You just kind of do it. But the wonderful thing about being an author also is it's a great journey for yourself, because by giving these talks and people asking these questions and other questions of which I had no real answer to, like who is Thursday Next based on? What sort of women do you use as inspiration for this kind of character? Because Thursday Next, if you haven't, if people listening haven't read it, is a very, very sort of gutsy, strong woman who can travel inside fiction. And the great thing about it, as I said, is that you can look back and then try and figure out why and how you wrote these books. And Thursday Next is based on a whole heap of very, very interesting, sort of exciting women that I've read about throughout my years, and I think is based on sort of female aviators of the golden age of aviation. It's a sort of Amy Johnson, Bessie Coleman, Amelia Earhart, Beryl Markham, all of whom just suddenly thought, I'm going to go and fly an airplane. And they didn't think, oh, I can't fly an airplane, because I've got to wash the dishes. They just went and flew an aeroplane. Amy Johnson, who is one of, I think, the Britain's most famous aviatrix, she got in a second-hand aircraft and flew to Australia with only, I think she had 90 hours after doing her license. So she was not, she was an amateur pilot. She got in this second-hand, ropey old aircraft, open cockpit, and she flew to Australia using a map that really is like a schoolboy's atlas map, of the world, and that was what she did. And it was a bit like sort of you and I, maybe, or anyone today. Sort of, she wasn't old; she was about 25. A 25-year-old today saying, "I'm going to go to Pluto, and no one can stop me." It was that kind of, exciting sort of thing that she did that I think sort of inspired me for those. But I think that's where it came from.
Right. So, it's what was, the question you listed out some questions that people ask, how can you as a male author write from a female point of view? And you said that Thursday Next came out as a character in one of your early books, which you then sold. And my question would be, now that you're an established author, um, do you deliberately create female characters that can be considered, one of those pioneers, or do you just follow your instincts with each book and each series that you write?
I think really I write what interests me. As an author, I mean, there's two ways you can look at being an author. You can either think that you are put on this planet for some grand improvement of us all, or you can be there to tell stories. Primarily, I'm here to tell stories, and I'm here to amuse people. However, saying that, I work in the entertainment business. That's what I consider myself doing. I'm not a sort of literary author. I'm an entertainment author. But having said that, I think there is a responsibility for authors to really promote what you feel is positive about the human experience, and actually to take away what is negative. And I think rather than being preachy in my books, which I hope never to be ever, is I think if I promote the way I think things should be in my sort of politics. If I have themes in my books that are about sort of social inclusion and celebration of diversity and or equality, all these sort of things, then there are themes that run through the book. And themes in a book like this, when people read them, it becomes part of this invisible cloud above us, which is a sort of the grand public imagination, if you will, the hive mind that we have as humans. And you're putting a little puff in that cloud, and you're trying to send it in the right direction, And it's kind of, if we all do that as authors, if we promote these good things without saying, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is how you need to be, then I think that's more important, because people don't want to be told stuff, And I think people know how to behave, but we just need this little puff, this little nudge to move things in the right direction.
Yeah, that's absolutely why we are holding Read for Pixels, because we had this discussion with another author, and basically we don't want to preach, because social justice messages like stop violence against women, there's only so much you can do to say to people, don't do that, do this instead. But authors like you, Jasper, are influential in the nudges, as you say. You get people thinking. You get people thinking about the possibility of a better future, a different way of handling things, of seeing things, and and that's what I love your Thursday Next books, and I take so much joy in reading them, because like you said, it's not about being preachy. It's and the message is still there. It's still very clear about being inclusive, being accepting, and not holding women back. Like Thursday Next, she just keeps going. She just keeps going, and it's one of the questions. One of the things I was curious about is as a storyteller and a male author, what do you think of the recent discussion? I mean, it's not that recent, but it started since Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when Joss Whedon turned the whole little blonde victim a trope on its head and made her the Slayer. What do you think of the term strong female character? Because it seems a bit, what's the word for it? It seems a bit it's a bit pat, isn't it? It's a bit trite. So what do you think is a strong female character? And do you think that more authors should create them deliberately, or do you think that it's something that should just become a natural part of pop culture as a whole? Do you think it's becoming that?
Well, I mean, throughout history, there have always been strong female female characters. You know, if you go from, you know, sort of Clytemnestra and, you know, Helen and Boadicea and all these sort of characters, and you know, Zenobia, you know, the Queen of Palmyra. There's been an awful lot of Cleopatra. I mean, there's been an awful lot of very, very powerful women. But if you're going to write powerful women, they can't just be powerful. There has to be something else. They have to be vulnerable as well. And it's like Superman and his kryptonite. You know, there has to be something that can get to them. So I think it doesn't help, you know, perhaps making them. I mean, just like Buffy, you know, because she's very normal, really. Apart from the whole vampire slaying thing, you know, she's actually relatively normal. And I think that's what I try to do with my characters. Is they're not super women. You know, Thursday is an ordinary woman. I mean, she doesn't think of herself as remarkable at all. She has children, she has a husband, she has a house, she has a home that she loves. She just does amazing things, and I think that's the important thing with Jennifer Strange in these Dragon Slayer books as well, is that she is actually quite normal, and she has some issues. She's an orphan. She can't stop working for these magicians because she's been sold into indentured servitude until the age of 18. She can't get away. But all these sort of bizarre adventures come her way, and she just takes it on the chin and just gets on with it. And I think that's a much more endearing way of looking at, maybe not endearing is the wrong word, but I think that's perhaps a more realistic way of dealing with, you know, with strong female characters like this. Not perhaps that they go out to do stuff, but things happen to them, and it's the way that they react in this way. I don't think any of my characters actually went out there to court excitement or disaster or whatever. They just deal with difficult problems in very sort of unique, perhaps funny and complex ways. So it's there's a very subtle, there's a kind of subtleness really about this. It's very difficult to define making a real character, because if you read about a character and you want to be like them or you want to know them, then they have to be people that you recognise, I think. And Thursday is somebody that I could recognise, and Jennifer, I think, is someone I could recognise as well.
Oh, okay. So there, you know, your work is extremely widely read. I mean, you're read all over the world, and it's translated in so many languages. And, you know, aside from, you know, girls and women, I'm sure your readership has a wide cross section of, come from a wide cross section of people, you know, in terms of nationality, gender, and all that. And there are boys and young men who read your novels. So how important do you think it is for these readers to experience stories that feature young male characters or male characters, period, that they can identify with, who treat women with respect? Do you think it's important for our authors to include male characters that treat women with respect in their stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is really, really important. One of the most a character I like a great deal, who doesn't seemingly do very much, is Thursday's husband, who's called Landon, and he exists in a role. He has seemingly no real career of his own, and we find out throughout the series that what he does is he supports Thursday, and that is what he does. And he accepts it totally, and he understands it, and she understands it, and no one really says anything about it. But I think it's and the point that, you know, I'm actually pointing it out now, because it's not an overt part of the story. But anyone who reads about Thursday and Landon, and you say, well, what is the relationship between them? And they clearly love each other very, very much. And no one is no one is the boss of the relationship. But it's very much that Landon supports Thursday in anything she is trying to do, and he sees that as his role, as a support role to a very important, powerful is perhaps the wrong word, very important but very driven woman. And I think that's an important role model for men to understand. Certainly, is that really there could be nothing more satisfying than to be in support of somebody who is truly remarkable, who obviously then accepts that help and loves them for it and everything else. So I think it's an interesting role to have. I mean, in the Jennifer Strange books, she has a boyfriend who makes a very great sacrifice for her, but it is in a very similar role. He understands that what she is doing is of vital importance and more important than him, more important than his life. And I think that is really sort of almost nothing more to be said. But they are important roles. When you're writing, I can't write a book that just has a strong female protagonist. There are male models, characters around her, and they're all very interesting for all sorts of different ways. But the ones who are close to my characters are generally in a very supportive, non sort of antagonist role, and I think that is important.
Yeah, because it just occurred to me. It reminds me of a parallel relation. It reminds me of Katniss and Peeta in the Hunger Games. Because Katniss is all out there, and she's the main protagonist, and she's taking action and all that. And Peeta is just Peeta's just supporting her all the way, and she rescues him sometimes. And it's quite a bit of role reversal there. And I think, like with Landon Park Lane, I actually find his character quite refreshing, because it's not alpha male. He's not an alpha male. He's not a beta male, as today's parlance calls it. Tries to classify men. He just is. He and Thursday are just characters, are people in their own right, and the dynamics of their relationship is just really interesting, because I think we see more and more relationships like that these days, as feminists and women's rights campaigners and gender equality campaigners keep pushing forward for real equality. And I think a lot of the upcoming generation of young men are going to be more like Landon Park Lane than they would be like, I don't know, one alpha character. They'll be more like Landon Park Lane than they would be like Mr. Rochester.
Yeah. No, you're right. But it's it's very frustrating. I like watching movies. Like same as anyone. But it's always annoying, because they start off often with an interesting female protagonist who then ends up having to be rescued by a guy, and it's just so tediously boring and predictable. So we get a bit annoyed by it, really, to be honest. But all that really needs to change, and it's a very slow process. But we try and do our little bit.
Yeah, it is. Someone said that the current surge of in young adult literature, the current surge of very proactive, very human, very strong female characters like Katniss Everdeen. They call it the Hermione effect, because suddenly we're seeing this whole wave of young female protagonists, coming up through the books, and the movies are selling so well, and it's good. But so I also noted that if we're talking about pop culture now, if we compare, say, film and television seems to I don't know if you agree with this, but television seems to they have progressed more than film, because, like you say, film, it starts with female character, and then in the end she has to be rescued. But on television, starting with Buffy, and then going on to Elias, and all the even Doctor Who's companions, they've become so proactive. The Sarah Jane Adventures, the companion got her own series. I mean, what do you think of the difference between the way film and television treat female protagonists these days?
Film is very resistant to change, because the stakes are very, very much higher. We're talking about a financial institution, a vast financial institution, and people want, producers, the people who put up the money, they want to get their return, obviously, and people are going to be a little bit conservative, and they're going to think, well, you know, what sold last year, you know, what sold the year before. Let's not do anything too different. The interesting thing about TV, and I think for many, even a lot of filmmakers are now saying, is that the exciting place to be is to work in television, because television moves much quicker. It has lower budgets, and once a series has been commissioned, you're generally, you know, given relative freedom to actually develop the plots and the characters as you see fit. And also, you have a team of writers who are actually writing 4 episodes ahead, and they can actually look at what the actresses are doing, and they can say, well, we can develop this character in this interesting way. So I think TV is I think really becoming a much more interesting medium now than movies. Movies used to be, you know, the really sort of cutting edge of what's bizarre and what's strange and what's happening. But nowadays, and especially with digital effects being much cheaper, there's an awful lot of really good material coming on TV. And I think that's good, because there's a lot more made on TV, and if you can change things much quickly. If you've got 20 or 30 different series promoting a slightly better idea about you know, the women's role, rather than movies, which you know, you have, what do you have? You have 12 summer blockbusters, and you watch 3 of them. And so I think TV is definitely the way to go, and especially also people are watching so much more stuff on YouTube and on demand, Netflix and everything, and all that comes onto tablets and phones. So the access of television was always large, but I think it's going to increasingly get even bigger. So it's a great place to bring all these new ideas to bear.
Do you think Thursday Next or Jennifer Strange will ever get their own TV series? That would be absolutely fantastic.
Well, yeah, I would like that. That would be nice. There's nothing. We have. There is an option running at the moment on the Jennifer Strange series, so we're wondering whether something will come of that. But you know, an option is just an option, and until they're actually on the set filming, it's not really happening. It would be nice. It would be nice, but who knows?
Well, you know, Outlander took 20 over years to get to television, and they're doing it correctly now. So hopefully it wouldn't take too long before Jennifer Strange, you know, makes her appearance on television. I definitely watch it. You know, it would be very well. Your worlds, Jasper, the worlds that you create, they are so. You know, it paints such a technicolor, really brightly color splashed image, you know, in the reader's mind. And sometimes I catch myself wondering as I read your books. You know, I catch myself wondering, I wonder what it'll look like on film or on the television. You know, it's got to be really color drenched, full of movement, and you know. Hopefully one day they'll do it. One day, you know, hopefully one day they would bring them all to life. And you know, related to what we were talking about film and television, and you know, recently there have been attacks on a feminist critic called Anita Sarkeesian, and she critiques gaming and gamers from a feminist point of view, and you know, she points out a lot of really salient points about how women are excluded and there aren't enough female characters in games, and she's being hounded out of her house. You know, they threatened to rape her, they threatened to burn her house down, I believe. They threatened her parents, and you know, and that's just one in a long line of aggressive pushbacks by certain male quarters of the geek world. And when I say geek world, I mean, you know, sci-fi and fantasy readers, gamers, people who are interested in, you know, everything geek. And what do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics or gaming or books, more welcoming for women and girls?
I don't know. What a question. It's a very difficult one to answer. Where could one even begin to try and think about how you can make that work? Can you? Could it be? I mean, there are all sorts of arguments you could say. You could say legislation, but is that really quite the right thing to do? There's arguments for legislation, arguments against regulations. It's a very hard one. I'm not a gamer. I've never played a game. My sons play the games, and the strange thing is that both my sons are gamers. They play games which I don't think are particular. Whenever my son is playing, games, I go, is there a crash that you have? Where are the women? Can your avatar be female? And all this sort of stuff. And he goes, yeah, ho ho, very funny, Dad. But I mean, the point is that both my sons seem extremely pleasant people who are clearly not doing any harm to anyone, and my son have girlfriends and who love them very much, and they're not taking what they are seeing in the game out of the game. But clearly there are, as you describe, and we hear this on the news a lot, there are people who take what is in the game out of the game. And that's kind of worrying, and these things are being reinforced to certain people. And how to target these certain people is tricky, because the annoying thing certainly about the gaming community is that it would be very difficult for me to give any figures, but there are many people in the gaming community who are totally normal, pleasant, respectful, good, decent, hardworking, honest people. Yet it's very easy for a small minority to give everyone a very bad name. So quite how you would target all this, I'm really not sure. How you would analyze the problem, again, it's a very, very difficult one. Clearly it needs to be a sort of grassroots thing, but certainly I think that saying we have to attack video games, video games are bad and everything is bad, that promote these things might not be the right thing to do. But there must be some answers out there about education, certainly, because you don't grow up to be to do those horrible things, the trolls, as you described, who said those awful things and make threats and everything like that. That isn't created overnight. That isn't an attitude that somebody just suddenly decides. This is something that's been perhaps there for many, many years. And I would suggest that perhaps going into schools, improving education like this in schools would certainly be a very good place to start, because a lot of these attitudes you talk about, and people I meet who have these very negative attitudes about gender, have had them for a very long time, and have grown up with them, and have observed them in others close to them. And these are the difficulties. I think that we really sort of have to look at it and say this is a cyclical thing, and we have to somehow break this cycle, but without taking a sort of perhaps an overtly sort of attacking gamers or these sort of things, without actually saying maybe these people who are gaming and are really unpleasant would be unpleasant even if they weren't gaming. So it's a very difficult one to say, and I'm not no expert in how to deal with this. But as I said earlier in this interview, my small part in this is to try and promote what I feel is the right way of living, through my books, but and through obviously bringing up children and everything else. So yeah, it's a difficult question, and I'm sorry I don't have any particular answer to it, and I'm being vague.
No, it's. I think I was quite vague as well, because I wasn't just talking about gaming, and you're a fantasy author, so in science fiction and fantasy as well, some people feel that it's still a boys' club in a way, and how do we change that? Because comic books, fantasy, all these things, everything about pop culture, a lot of people still think it's it excludes women so much, which is why the Hermione effect. People are so happy about Hermione, the current Hermione effect going on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's it's a male-centric world. I'll just show you my foot. Look, hang on. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, your foot.
Yeah,
Right.
I
Yes.
got a. Yeah. So quite recently, I severed my Achilles tendon rather annoyingly. That's why I have to wear that big orthopedic boot. What it means is I'm stuck in the house, and so anyone who comes to the house gets talked at a lot. And I won't say which religious group who do door-to-door proselytizing, but I had a religious group round at the door, and two women, and they engaged me in conversation about their religion, their particular branch of Christianity. And I kept them talking for about an hour because I hadn't spoken to anyone that day. And I was struck by the very, very strong gender imbalance that existed within their denomination. And I ended up arguing with these two women about gender equality. And they were arguing to me about how important it was to them to have men at the head of their church. And I was going, why? Who put us in charge? And if you were an all-seeing, all-knowing, deity, and you looked at the two genders on the planet and thought, right, which one are we going to put in charge? The sensible one or the one that likes to kill people? You wouldn't give all that power to the one that kills people. And you just have to look around and to know how huge gender imbalance, and it comes right from the very top. There are billions of people on this planet who look to males to tell them how to live their lives, and I'm not sure that's healthy or right. It's a big problem, and it's huge, and it's like almost in the very fabric of humans at the moment, and it may not change for hundreds of years. But if we look at the last 100 years, and I'm not saying that we have to say, oh well, just have to wait. That's it should happen sooner. But if you look at the changes that have been wrought in the last 100 years, to the rights of women and gender balance and equality and everything, tremendous strides have already been made. Here in the UK, with the Church of England, they've voted now to have bishops, female bishops, which is a huge leap for the Church of England, and it will be a very small move towards having a female archbishop, actually a female head of the titular head of the Church of England, which will be a huge step. And these are small incremental steps, and a very good. I'm trying to remember his name. A very good science fiction writer said to me that some of the most important contributions have been made by people dying. And I said, okay, that's a very interesting statement. How do you qualify that? And he said, well, when people die, they take their dogma with them, and the new people carry on with the new ideas. And I went, yeah, that's brilliant. Can you imagine if humans died aged 30? How quickly all our new ideas would be taken on and embraced, and how swift we would move, hopefully, into better pastures. But it is a very small, slow. People live a long time, and people take their prejudices with them for a very long time, and that's problematical. And I think that we've not. I'm not saying be patient is the wrong sort of thing. We have to keep on moving forward. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. I think it's probably the thing to say, and to consider perhaps, in the way I do, in that my small part in this is that we all have small parts to play, and we may not see the changes that we want to see change in our own lifetimes for that very reason. But that people have to die and take their bullshit with them. You see what I mean?
Yeah, so, I mean, it is true. I mean, Jasper, I mean, in my own life, because I'm ethnic Chinese, and it's taken the women in my family over 100 years to get from my great-grandmother and great-aunts who had their feet bound, From them to myself and my cousin, my female cousins. I went to Oxford. My mother could only dream of that. She couldn't, she just finished school and that was it. And and every generation that progresses, it went something better. It first started bound feet. Then my grandmother did not have bound feet. And then my mother was sent to school and she finished school. Then they sent me to university and I went to Oxford. My cousin is a specialist doctor. I have all my female cousins, my sister, we're all working. We are independent, we earn our own, even if we are married, we contribute to as equals. And but it takes, like you said, it takes a while to change. It took my father 30 years to learn a lot about 30 years and 2 daughters, to learn a lot about, girls are just as good as boys. And it took my grandmother longer than that to realize, that, granddaughters are just as good as grandsons. But it changes, like you said, changes very slow, and it happens. You just have to be really, really patient. And like you said, we might not see it in our lifetime, but what we do now might have, it might have an effect further down the road. And speaking of families, you're a dad. You have 4 daughters. You have 2 sons. And how do you think? As a dad? How do you think any tips for dads out there about raising gender egalitarian kids? Raising daughters to understand their own self-worth, raising sons to respect women. Any tips out there for parents and teachers?
That's a hard one. Giving parental advice. Yeah, as though we needed more people giving parental advice. I don't know. I mean, the same thing. With my boys, I was I was not a particular team sport kind of guy myself. So I was never big into promoting, soccer and rugby with my boys. We never had guns in the house. Guns as toys were forbidden. Even a stick shaped like a gun wasn't allowed in the house. I think that's very important. Whenever my sons used to build things out of Lego, and it was usually some war machine, so 8-wheeled, armored vehicle. I used to say, does it have baby changing facilities, and does it have a crash, because clearly in this alien invasion game you're playing, women and men have equal roles, and of course somebody has to look after the children, and of course it's not the sort of thing that sons want to hear. They go, yeah, dad, whatever, ho ho. But I don't know, maybe some bits sticks in there. I'm not sure. I mean, with my girls, when they're being hideously girly, and they want to, put on makeup and nails and stuff like that, and they're very, very young. We have a mantra in our house, which is brighten a room with your mind and your ideas, not with how you look. And they go, oh, Dad, but there's a lot of peer pressure out there, huge amount of peer pressure. You can do what you want, really, and you can help, and you can try and point your kids in the right direction. But as soon as they get to school, a lot of it gets sort of chucked out the window. But promoting, engineers, technical toys, all that sort of stuff, I've always tried to do that with, varying states of success with my kids. My younger children, they love playing with Lego and building stuff and things like that, and we try not to, go down the huge Barbie route, which I find a little bit hideous, I must say. I think it's as damaging perhaps as giving boys guns. Giving a boy a toy gun. I don't understand why you would do that. But but I think the Barbie is the equivalent, is the female equivalent. So we kind of avoid that as well. But we don't want to be really miserable sort of Victorian parents either, so you always have to sort of find a middle ground, but they kind of know our viewpoints,
Yeah, it's quite funny you should say all that you said. There are going to be heaps of parents cheering you on because I work in women's rights, and there's actually a movement of parents who believe the same thing you do. You know, they believe that, you know, the color pink should not be foisted on girls, that, you know, gender shouldn't be color coded, that, you know, there shouldn't be guns lying, toy guns lying around, and girls should be encouraged, you know, encouraged to have a wide range of toys, and, you know, shops should not. I don't know about, you know, in the UK I haven't seen that because I lived in England for a long time before coming back to Asia. But, you know, in the US, apparently it's hideously gender segregated in the toy shops. There are pink aisles for girls and everything else for boys, which is, it sort of boggles your mind, really, because children don't really care about, you know, Lego is gender neutral. You know, children don't really care about that. You know, what they care about is being stimulated, I guess. And that sort of leads me to my next question. And oh, viewers out there, if you have any questions for Jasper, please just type them into the Q&A box, which appears to the right of the screen, and we will answer it if you have them there. And if you're on Twitter, just, you know, do a hashtag with read4pixels, read and the number 4 pixels, and we'll check. But we'll be done with this in another 15 minutes, so get your questions in. And so going back to what we're discussing, so related to that, I'm going to ask you another loaded questions. I seem to be asking you loaded questions today, aren't I? Okay, feminist is a loaded word. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. Feminist is a loaded word. So do you consider yourself a feminist, and why do you think good men like yourself, well, not yourself, but good men like yourself, have been reluctant to speak up against violence against women and other gender injustices?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah. How does one define feminism? Again, impossible to do. All I can say is that one supports. You know, I've almost got to the point now where it's I've gone beyond the equality, and we're going, actually, I think we need more women in charge, clearly. You know, that actually an imbalance the other way, certainly when it comes to things like, you know, running stuff. You know, here in Europe, we have one, hang on, no we don't. How many leaders? Angela Merkel is the most obvious world leader here we have in Europe. And she's an extraordinary woman. I mean, really extraordinary. And there's a saying that that I bandy about quite often, is that men get into politics for power, and women get into politics to change things. Now, I thought that all politicians were actually there to change things, but you look around at men in politics, and you think, I'm not sure you're there to actually change things. I think you're there for the power, and that's wrong. And if you know, if my sort of flawed gender is somehow in these jobs for the wrong reason, then maybe we're not right for being in charge at all. So I'm sort of, you know, going in the other way, and I'm not saying equality. I'm saying actually there's a kind of disquality that we need here, and that maybe men should find some other role. You know, why are there so many of us? That's another one I can't understand either. Why are there so many men? There don't need to be. But
yeah, it's odd because, you know, what you just said, it's almost exactly the same thing that Joe Hill said in his, you know, his Google Hangout with us. He was talking about women need more representation in you know, in the Senate, in the House, and you know, and he was saying that, as he said something that is almost it's similar to what you said. He said men get into gridlocks or power struggles and nothing gets done, whereas women can disagree on things, on points, but in the end they sort of make compromises with each other and they hash it out and they get things done. So he was going on about, you know, if you want to see more things done in government, elect more women. That was what he said. So that's interesting that you said just about the same thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone the other day about our Parliament. We have over 600 MPs in the House of Commons, and somebody was saying about representation of minority groups, and I go, okay, let's start off with gender equality in Parliament. You know, how many female MPs are there against how many male MPs? Isn't that one we should actually really start tackling. I'm not saying getting ethnic minorities into common isn't important, but I think you could actually make a real start just by saying why do we not have 50% women? Because 50% of the population is female. Unfortunately, it isn't, obviously, as you know, but just under. But yeah, I mean, that'd be a good place to start, wouldn't it? Just in the corridors of power.
Yeah, funnily enough, do you know that Rwanda has the best gender balanced parliament in the world?
Do they? Good for them. They've also got some fantastic scenery as well.
Yes.
Rwanda's beautiful.
Yes, they. I think it's Rwanda. Yeah, it's Rwanda. I think they apparently. If I remember correctly, please everyone don't shoot me if I get this wrong, but actually the parliament is majority female because so many men died in the war. So majority female, and they're getting the country rebuilt, and they're getting it done, and they're getting it done steadily at a steady pace. So it's kind of sad, isn't it, for women to have majority in parliament? Lots of men need to have died.
Yeah, it's rather worrying, isn't it? Yeah, very worrying.
Yeah. So the second part of my question just now was, why do you think good men like yourself have been reluctant to speak up against violence against women and issues of gender equality? Why do you think they've been so reluctant? I mean, younger men do speak up, but I noticed that boomers, my dad's generation, and he was born in 1945. At tail end of World War II, and the older men, or even men, in their 30s and 40s, they seem very reluctant to speak up against violence against women. It's taken us a long time to actually, as a non-profit, one of the tenets of one of the things that is part of our mission is to get more men and boys to speak up, to take action against violence against women, specifically male and cultural violence against women. And it is a long, hard slog. I mean, like we have every year we have a Father's Day campaign where we get 30 dads from around the world to answer just 3 simple questions on paper. One is, what's so great about being a dad? Number 2 is, how has your dad influenced you? And number 3 is, as a dad, how do you think men can help to stop violence against women? And you would not believe the amount of effort every year we have to go to. It's like we're asking them to go for a double root canal at the dentist without painkillers. So it's interesting to hear why you think men are so reluctant, even if they're good men, they're not violent, they're good dads, they're great members of society, and they're still reluctant to speak out. Why do you think this is the case?
I don't know at all, really. I mean, evil men. What is the saying that evil men triumph when good men do nothing? I think is the quote. Yeah, I think it's. I don't know. I can't really. I don't know. I can't really put myself in anyone's shoes. I mean, I've been in situations where, not recently, I must say, where you hear something going on and maybe in a pub or whatever, and you think, am I going to wade in and say, oh, you can't talk like that? I think sometimes it is difficult. I think there is a very strong sort of macho image, perhaps, that men like to sort of, kind of are beholden to. I don't really see why. I don't, find the challenge, the strong women challenge sort of manhood. I don't really see that myself. So I don't really know why, but it's difficult to put my head in. I mean, I'd have to write a sort of, if I could perhaps write a character, sort of, misogynist, a misogynist sort of first-person dialogue. Maybe I could get my head around it. But it's a very odd one. I mean, when I was brought up, my mother comes from a long line of very, very socialist, left-wing, equality-based people, So it was always drummed into me from a very early age that you know, there was diversity and that was fine, and you embrace that, and you know, everything else. So it never was an issue for me, and I never had those sort of questions that I had to ask myself, you know. So it's kind of hard one to answer, really. I think you need to find an author who was a hideous misogynist and is now not. Um, uh, and that might give you some very interesting insights about why they changed, or how they changed, or a particular mindset. I think it's like me trying to put my mindset into the sort of mindset of a sort of, you know, white supremacist or something. A very hard one for me to figure out, because I just you know, I just can't. You just have to figure that maybe just stupidity. I don't know. I think a lot of things, you know, if you can't explain something, there's another good saying I once heard that was never attribute to deviousness that which is more easily explained by stupidity, and that might go towards explaining things. But of course, you know, very stupid people can be some of the nicest, most pleasant, you know, people as well. So clearly, that's not it.
Yeah, well, those authors who are misogynist wouldn't answer our invitation, I don't think. I mean, every male author who answered our invitation, they're like you know, they have wives, they have a wife, they have a kid, they have kids, and you know, they're really gung ho about women's rights and, you know, stopping violence against women and girls. So I suppose it's one of those self-selecting things where, you know, we send invitations out, and the men who do support this are like you, and we might never ever get to talk to the men who don't. I mean, the authors who don't, not the men who don't, because we do talk every day. We do come across men who don't every day. They leave very rude messages on our Facebook and Twitter and and email. It's really poisonous. So we have one more question, and then we'll wrap up. And it's a simple one. Yay! At least I hope it's simple. All right. You have been, Jasper, you have been so very incredibly supportive of the Read for Pixels campaign and anti-violence against, you know, and the Pixel Project's anti-violence against women work as a whole. So why do you, as a man, an author, and a dad, specifically support the cause to end violence against women and girls?
Well, it's not. It's a kind of default question, really, because how can one not? You know, it's like sort of somebody saying to you, you know, would you, you know, it's a cause one has to support because it's of vital importance. I can't think of. Yeah, I mean, if you were to look around the planet and even see some of the worst, you know, war-torn trouble spots in the world, and you think, could that be improved by a few female leaders? And the answer is always yes, always. And you think, well, there must be some way in which this can be worked through. And if there are people who are trying to stop women from having their full potential, having their say, then we have to, you know, take these opportunities and support people like yourself and the project in trying, you know, in our small way, in some way, to try and improve the matters, because we improve things for all of us, and that's the important thing to also think about. This improves everything for everybody. You know, a world in which you know, women have a greater say in the running of the world and in everything else. It improves the world for everybody. Even the misogynists, although they won't realise it or appreciate it. You know, they will be living in a better world, a less war-torn world, and they'll be thinking, "Oh, good, you know, we don't have to carry our gun today." You know, I wonder why that is. But you know, one can't say no to important matters like this.
Yeah, that's great. So now before we go, I'm going to trot out this little slide, and
Yeah.
everybody, Jasper has very, very kindly donated a very unique perk. It's a chance to be a character, a minor character in his next novel. So if you want to get that perk, you've got a set amount to donate, and it's 1,500 US dollars because you will be read everywhere. Jasper's books are everywhere. If you're a minor character in Jasper's book, you're probably going to get read by Jasper. How many million readers do you have?
Oh, I don't know. I think I've sold 3 million books at the moment. But obviously people share books, and there are books in libraries and all the rest of it. And e-books are shared. So I don't know how many readers I've got, but readers not enough. I think is probably the answer. But we're working on it slowly.
Right, so, at least 3 million people will see you as a minor character in Jasper's next book if you donate to the Read for Pixels campaign. So I'm going to share a little slide. I think, Jasper, you'll be able to see it too. Do you see it?
Ah, there it is.
Yes. So to go get this really cool perk from Jasper, and there are plenty of other perks from other authors like signed first editions and Skype calls and short stories specially written for this campaign. Go to Indiegogo. Our page on Indiegogo is at is.gd/R4P Indiegogo. If you don't have a credit card and you only have PayPal, go to is.gd/R4P Razoo. And if you donate there, if you donate $15 to $50, you get some short stories from Guy Gabriel Kay, Delilah S. Dawson, and Kevin Hearn. And you can find out more about the Read for Pixels campaign at is.gd/Read for Pixels 2014. And if you want to find out a little more about the Pixel Reveal campaign, you can go to reveal.thepixelproject.net. And now, Jasper, any last words for us before we go off air?
Well, no, only thank you very much indeed for inviting me to join your project, and also thanks to you and everyone who works for your project in doing what you're doing to assist in this manner. It's of vital importance, and thank you very much indeed for doing this.
All right, so hold on, Jasper. I will just wrap it up, and then we'll say bye, and then that's it. So hang on. So next week, we have our final round of Read for Pixels Google Hangouts. Cinda Williams-Chima will be in the hot seat next Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's New York time. And Kevin Hearn, who created the very popular Iron Druid Chronicles, he'll be on as the final author in this series at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time again on Sunday the 28th. And with that, Jasper and I bid you good day, good morning, good night, wherever you are.